who amongst you positive, optimistic trends that you're seeing in the realm of entertainment? Things that make you not doomy and gloomy about your career choices and your artistic goals and or your educational goals.
I think, like, I don't know if this is maybe, I guess it's maybe a trend, but something that I've noticed among, like, because I feel like we're everyone this call, like, we're all, similar in age. I noticed, like, even as of when I joined Kids First and even a little before that, I love that everybody now, like all of us, like growing up, we want to pursue film and go to entertainment, and we're like not afraid to do that. I feel like back, maybe 10, 15 years ago, like I don't know that everybody pursued their dreams like we are now. I'm not saying that everybody like didn't have them or didn't, but I love that I'm hearing and all of the people producing films, and even like hearing my sister, like she did script writing and stuff, like people pursuing and wanting to make films because they have the passion, regardless of like they don't think about like they're like, that's my dream, I'm gonna make it happen. And I feel like that's why the films in the future, I mean, filmmaking is awesome. I mean, there's so many variety and it's so great, but I love that I feel like the content is still gonna keep getting better and better because people are like putting their hearts into it, seeing what's been done, and it's like, okay, I can do that, and then maybe I could do that a little better. So I love that we have this like fighting mentality, and I feel like it's just gonna be so good. Like everybody now, I'm like, I know I'm gonna see like everybody on this call in a couple of years, like so famous. Like that's how I feel because it's gonna happen. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, there is something, and I think this is why I was interested when Randy reached out to me in the first place, which is that with all the chatter about, movies don't matter, mass entertainment doesn't matter, everything's, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, there obviously is still a contingent that still prioritizes long form or modestly short form storytelling of that nature. So I guess if I may ask another generic question, as young adults who grew up in when entertainment was sort of pivoting to online, social media, whatever, what is it about old artsy fartsy movies that still keeps why movies, even in a world with countless other entertainment options that didn't even exist when I was your age?
I feel like with more older movies, like before, like let's say like 2020, like things like TikTok, or like a streaming world, I feel like why that still is still strong and it's aging well is because, and it's still a respected film like medium, is because a lot of it is we like to see a progression of characters and seeing how they grow and develop over time. And I feel like with movies back then, they weren't thinking about so much what is the trend happening now. It's more of like, this is a story we're thinking of creating. And then the trend developed after the film was released. With today, it's more of like, this is a trend we want to do. Let's try to capitalize on it now.
And yet time and time again, and this goes to an old thing, an old saying I like to, where you make far more money from the first Harry Potter than trying to find the next Harry Potter, or the next, the first Yellowstone versus the next Yellowstone, and so forth and so forth. And yet, unfortunately, in this industry, and I do blame the audience, at least partially, I do think there was a pivot about a decade ago where a lot of the general audience stopped showing up to movies just to go to a movie. And when you lost that audience, that's where the studio programmers and the non-franchise films and the original high concept films started to really struggle at the box office. And either people were watching that on streaming, which isn't nearly as lucrative on a project by project basis, or they just weren't watching it at all. And for a while, I mean, streaming was sort of thought as the great hope, where, Hollywood was spending all their time chasing the Avengers. So, the old school star driven, not all quadrant, you know, character studies of the moment topical narratives But you were seeing that on streaming and cable and what have you. But unfortunately, once everybody got into the streaming thing, they all went right back into the IP dumpster divings. Like, oh boy, let's turn Fatal Attraction into a miniseries. Let's do a Grease prequel. Let's do whatever. And I don't know where it goes from here, but that's clearly not working. Anyway, again, I don't mean to ramble.
Well, I also think that I think there was still a need to go to the cinema, and COVID was a huge factor in that. Well, there is this whole thing about are movie theaters going to stay alive or not? They are, because people still want to go and get lost for 90 or 120 minutes in a cinema. It's a community experience, and I don't care what anyone says, going to the movies still feels magical to me, and I'm never going to lose that feeling. And that could just be me and a very small group of people, but it's a big enough group for us to still have a lot of movie theaters still open. I mean, there's a movie theater called the BFI IMAX, which is the largest screen in Europe. It is about the size, is as tall as 3 double-decker buses. And that is my flatmate and ours, like, mecca. It is our we try to see a film there once a month because it's such a grand experience. And yes, we can talk about like how a lot of people nowadays want to watch movies on their iPads, on their phones. And yes, some people say that TV is where to go. A lot of creators go to TV now because that's where the money is, and that's where TV is willing to take more risks. I don't think we should negate that. I think that should be something that we should applaud, because even though we're getting like 40 different streaming services and every company wants to do their own thing, for whatever, with Guillermo del Toro, for whatever Pacific Rim, we get A Shape of Water. You need those films to get butts in seat to keep the industry thriving, so that we can have these art, so studios can take risks. So yes, while we may groan that we're making Toy Story 5, Toy Story 5 is keeping the lights on so that we can get spectacular movies that Disney can hopefully be able to pursue. So I'm very optimistic with where the industry is going, in terms of getting butts in seat and getting people. And again, people are still wanting to watch. People were able to watch a 2-hour black and white film about Oppenheimer. If people were able to watch that and enjoy that, the 3-hour film, yes, but it felt like 2 hours. See, I don't even know the length
Maybe
of it,
2 hours are in black and white. I don't remember.
People wanted to go see that, or the Barbie film. Like,
yeah,
these films are still happening. And also another thing about it is that we have films like American Fiction, which are mid-length, like mid-budget films that are still able to be successful. So
no,
we're going to make movies. We're going to keep making movies. We're going to make stories. How that changes, it's always going to change. But the feeling and the hope and the passion is still there.
I will say one of the more positive developments is Amazon, of all places, where, obviously they're producing and releasing movies, but what they've been doing is they've been using the prestige and publicity and awareness that's created by a theatrical release for the quote unquote original pictures like American Fiction or Boys in the Boat or Saltburn. Well, because those are the films that they feel need to be nurtured or challengers. While straight to Prime Video tends to be, ironically, the IP stuff. Like, it's Jake Gyllenhaal without a shirt in Roadhouse, or it's Anne Hathaway knocking a pop star in The Idea of You. And that one was actually
Don't
very
take
good.
Idea of You. Idea of You is great.
Oh, it's a very good
Love
movie.
that movie.
Oh, no. Anne Hathaway is one of the more, she's good at what she does, and I think she has incredible taste in Pulp Fiction in terms of, whether it's Colossal or, Interstellar or what have you. I think if she wasn't just so ridiculously gorgeous, she'd be better known as one of the great actresses of her era. But tough break. Anyway. But yeah, and even like something like A Simple Plan 2, which I'm mad that that's not going to theaters, because the only reason that's marketable from the get-go is because it was a theatrical hit in the first place. But whatever. That's my own whining. So let's see. What did I forget? Wow, we got through. Yeah. I guess this is more of a generic, and then I'll let you ask me questions if you want. What to you is the future of entertainment? I mean, I know it's a very generic question, but I'm kind of curious because you are all working in different aspects of the industry almost globally to a certain extent. And whether it's mass market, whether it's, transactional, actually paying money to consume, because that's obviously a big part of it. Where do you think we're going to be in the next 5, 10, let's say 10 years? Assuming we don't end up in, Planet of the Apes, Mad Max, which is, let's hope not.
I feel like, to just start off the conversation, I feel like streaming is gonna go back to cable in the sense that there's gonna be more ads. I feel like when streaming first started, it was like everything's on demand. And like, this is your escape from cable because cable has all those advertisement. But now it's like, all streaming services are like more expensive, like $20 or something. And now they're doing bundle plans where you can have like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus. So I see in the future we're gonna have like all these like chains come together for like $100 just to have like streaming in like one more narrowed but also separated platforms.
Yeah, I mean, my big conspiracy theory was that the entire push to streaming was basically an attempt to reinvent cable so you didn't have to pay anyone, residuals, and or an attempt to create a status quo that was such that only the very biggest studios could survive without getting bought or sold or merged. But again, I don't know how much of that was intentional versus just how it turned out. I will say that two of the healthier studios right now are Sony and Lionsgate, the ones that basically sat out the streaming wars and just were arms dealers for a few years. So good on them for not taking the bait. Sony learned their lesson with Crackle.
Oh, sorry. No, that's a really good point. I think just because I don't know as far as like the film perspective. I know like everybody on this call like can probably really give a good example about that. As far as like the marketing and business perspective, like everybody mentioned with merging and like the relationship between what the process of how his film is made and how it's marketed and all of that. I think it also really depends per each studio. And I think like Ryan was saying, with everything seeming to come together, I think that's an uncertain but could be good or like concerning thing, because I think now all of us have to work together. Like, I think it's also important, like for me in marketing, like I do understand how to try and engage an audience, and so does everybody else here, but I might not know exactly like the plot behind a film or how it should be written in order to capture the audience. So I think if we can all kind of work together and use our talents and ideas to try and get our audience as best as we can, I think it could be awesome. But in terms of business, it is kind of uncertain because sometimes the decisions like they just happen. I mean, companies merging together, that's a huge business decision. But for somebody who's a marketer, what are you going to do except adapt? So I think adaptability is really important.
I do think and I felt this way for a while. I mean, since I was your age, which is that creating mainstream awareness and mainstream interest is what's going to save mainstream cinema. And yes, a lot of it is, people don't want to greenlight anything original because if it doesn't work, then there's no one to blame but themselves. They can't say, oh, this worked 20 years ago, so it's not really my fault. Yes, it's people are going to the movies in pretty huge numbers, even before, and compared to pre-COVID days, but they're just consolidating their choices around a smaller and smaller number of event movies. And that was been an issue for the last decade. But I think if we can find a way to successfully market for wide theatrical release a $20 million studio programmer and not have to spend $40 million marketing it, that is sort of the missing part of the puzzle. Because when people always say, why spend 200 million on one movie, why not take 10 for 20? The problem is you have to spend 30 to 40 just to market each of those pictures. And obviously, as you would know, and you all would know, it's getting harder because the tools that used to be there where you would automatically have people's attention are no longer in play, whether it's, talk shows, late night talk shows, daytime talk shows, even Saturday Night Live. Everybody thrills to Ryan Gosling's SNL hosting thing, and everybody laughs and shares the Beavis and Butthead sketch. Nobody shows up to the Fall Guy because there's no the example I always like to use is, in the summer of, I think, 2021, Olivia Rodrigo becomes basically the biggest pop star in the world. Awesome, wonderful. It doesn't move the ratings for High School Musical 2, the series, the musical, an inch on Disney Plus. There's just no cause and effect in that sense. I don't know what to do about that, but I do know that is an existential problem. Did anyone have any? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to just add to that. So the world of film and theatrical releases is, that's like one category. And like what I've been really diving into is TV and how that's changing and streaming and SVOD and fast TV. And like a big thing that they've been talking about is this idea that there's so much to consume that people are so stressed and they actually like don't really know what to put on at this point because there's just so much new content that essentially we're going back to the days of cable in a sense where people like actually just want to put on a channel and to just like watch continuously and kind of have someone else select what they watch. And so like fast TV is super interesting because it's essentially just like free, you're just like watching a free advertisement supported television network, but it's on these like streaming services. So I think that's super interesting that like we're kind of going backwards, and I wonder what else that entails, like what else are we going to go backwards on now. But so that's super interesting to me. The other one, like just going back to AI, is just like Sora is so freaking cool. I don't know if you guys have like just like YouTubed a Sora video. It looks so realistic, and I think that's really going to be interesting for advertisement based filmmaking. So like I'm curious to see like if a Nike commercial will just be like completely AI, like what would that look like? But yeah, so those are like some of the evolving aspects of the entertainment industry that I'm looking forward to seeing more of.
I do think you're correct in that. I think whether it was willful or whether they were just wrong, I think in the start of the pandemic, the industry very much misjudged the extent to which people wanted their entertainment consumption disrupted. The idea that, they don't want to go to the movies anymore. They don't want to watch television just casually anymore. We're going to give them everything they want at home for one, relatively low price. And then 500 million people will sign up and we'll all make money. We're like, and where are we back to now? Theatrical releases, third-party licensing, fast. One of my favorite streaming platforms is Tubi, for goodness sakes. I'm sure you all know what Tubi is. It's the one that has, Igmar Bergman's Cries and Whispers over here and Cannibal Holocaust over here in perfect harmony and everything in between. And it's again, I think we're just going back to what, David Zaslav may be a not awesome person, but I think he was, at least in this one way, kind of ahead of the curve and saying, look, this whole putting everything behind a wall of our own site and not making any tangible money for each piece of art isn't working. And he has been, Warner Bros. Discovery, they've been, third-party licensing their stuff. And whether or not that's successful over the long run, because their stock is still in the toilet, at least they're making money from the content, the films and shows they actually produce in a way that I think the studios were almost allergic to in the early days of the 2020s, even before, and I don't like to say after the COVID era, because we are still in a COVID era for all, and I don't want to, but, after the worst had passed, how about that? So yes, I do think, again, whether intentional or not, I think everything about the streaming thing was this giant figure eight to get us right back to where we were, but with some big differences, which is that, I think it's worse for the creators, it's worse for the artists, and I think to a certain extent it might even be worse for the consumer, but we'll see how that develops.
I
I
think it's
definitely
interesting
agree.
because
I feel like
Next.
oh,
go
okay.
for it.
So I was saying, like, with consumerism, I feel like because there's so many like streaming services, like all consumers are split up. So you have people who just watch Netflix only, who only watch Disney Plus, and with like TikTok, it's like FYP, like everything's curated to what the person's interest is. So it's more harder to get everyone together on the same page, essentially, just because it's all being divided up.
I was just gonna say that for the filmmakers kind of like in the room here, like as much as we want to be aware of what the industry is going and being aware what audience are looking for and the marketing aspect of that. It's a lot of noise that sometimes even myself kind of be like, I need to drown out, because at the end of the day, it's about just good stories and good characters and just making amazing films. And yes, we're in an industry, we're in a business, and we can't be naive to not even think that we have, at the end of the day, we want to make money off of this. But at least in my opinion, in terms of like what's the future of filmmaking or what's the future of entertainment, it's always going to change. But what's not going to change is people's craving for good stories. So, and that's always going to be the case. I do have faith in humanity, thankfully, in the sense I don't think that everyone's going to just want to watch, um, you know, reality TV, which by the way, reality TV has a place in the world. I watch Dance Moms. I was a huge Dance Moms fan, big time. Drag Race, need it, have to have it. But in terms of going to the movies and watching streaming services and TV, we are in a golden age of movie making and television. Let's not forget that we have some of the greatest television shows ever made, and from Marvelous Mrs. Maisel to The Last of Us, it's great. And we're still making good movies. Whether or not some of those movies are being seen or not, that's the hard part. And yes, a lot of films are going to get overlooked, unfortunately. But that's also back in the case back in the 90s, where a film didn't do well in the theaters, but it did well in home release. Same way a lot of TV shows nowadays. People are now discovering Gilmore Girls, and I'm not gonna lie, I had it on VHS and I was there before you guys. So
So was I.
it was great. Gilmore Girls was amazing. But so yeah, I think any filmmaker, any artist is gonna tell you the same thing. As long as somebody watches it, whether that be 10 years from now or when it just recently came out, as long as people enjoy it after the fact or in present moment, that's all that matters. It'll be nice to make money off of it and for people to enjoy it now, but who knows? It could be a cult classic.
It's also interesting because what you said, that reminded me of the question, Scott, that you asked earlier about what film did you watch in Kids First that you probably would have never seen. I feel like this film changed my opinion on films entirely. I remember Ranny sent me to go see Dunkirk, and I've learned about history in school, like didn't really know a lot about history, but learned about it. And I remember going in, I was like, I feel like I'm not going to understand this movie. That's just what I thought. I went, and the sound effects, the way the story was conveyed, awesome. And I think it takes experiences like that for individuals to go out of the box and see things that not just their friends tell them about, or not put something on the TV that's like popular. Like that's great too. But also being open-minded is going to really help, because I like to, like, I also recently started reading. I love reading different things that I don't know about. And I think that's the same with films too. It's like, yes, like these reality TV shows, awesome and are great, but maybe scroll a little further and pick something that catches your eye that maybe you don't know about, and you might end up loving it.
I mean, the good news is, the streaming era more or less has brought an incredible amount of shows and movies, often made and intended for what I would argue are underrepresented demographics. And I will admit, there's a part of me, the old man, that's like, I wish this stuff was around in the 80s and 90s during more of a monoculture, when it could have been seen by people that weren't necessarily the converted, so to speak. But I guess in the long run, it's better that it exists. It's almost more important that it exists than whether anyone watches it, because someone's going to watch it over the long run. One hopes. And it's I don't know. I have conflicted feelings about that. It's my it's speaking specifically to theatrical Hollywood. They finally started pulling their heads out of their butts and trying to turn every handsome white guy into the next Tom Cruise in the late 2010s, right when people stopped showing up for just a movie star. So I mean, I'm still cranky about that. Which is frankly a huge reason why original films and high concept new to you adaptations have struggled, is because in the old days, Will Smith as a non-toxic pickup artist was enough to make Hitch into a blockbuster. Now that character can be successful only when he's playing the genie in Aladdin, and that's just the new normal, unfortunately. So let me see, do you have any questions for me? if you don't, I won't be offended. I just didn't want to.
I was wondering, speaking with us, what are some what did you want to discover from a younger voice in the industry that you feel like maybe was missing from your perspective?
Honestly, you've all been very forthcoming in a way that, and I'm not going to say I was surprised because that's why I'm talking to you. But this is the kind of in the know, living through it experience and wisdom that I, being a 44-year-old with 3 kids who have minimal interest in pop culture as it exists, can only sort of guess at. So for me, this is very that's one of the reasons I'm doing this. This is very educational, partially just to make sure I'm not, wrong about what I hypothesize about in terms of what usually I'm talking about mass media entertainment, theatrical movies, and what have you, connecting to the younger audiences and the ones that still care about that kind of thing. If you're asking if there's something that I wanted to bring up that didn't get brought up, your peers that are less in the interest, less movie obsessive, for lack of a better word, do they still care about this stuff, or is this just at best something they do once a year when there's a new Disney tentpole in theaters? Or is it just, or do they actually show up for stuff like Challengers and Long Legs and somewhat more exciting movies that are aimed at the kids today, older kids today?
I think this relates to what Keefer said a little bit ago. I think like I know, or from my friends or people I work with, I think we all have, a lot of different interests, personalities, and everything. But one thing that Keefer said about like getting lost in 90 minutes or 2 hours or 3-hour movies, like everybody's career or interest, no matter what they choose, they want to relax and be invested in something that's going to take their mind off whatever they're dealing with. So yes, I think absolutely everybody loves movies and TV to like, escape. And like Talia was saying, depending on if they want to put in the time to go search for that show or just put on something just to have in the background, or they don't have the energy. I think like this all comes together, and I think if we can find like a common avenue, also, like Ryan and Carly were saying, just making sure that like we all want the same thing, I think, even if our interests are different. And that's why I think movies and film are so awesome. It's like, even if you might not like what the film is about, the message, while they're all different, like all you just go watch the movie, and then by the end of it, or TV, I'm pretty sure you're gonna feel like my Dunkirk experience. It's like, okay, maybe I didn't know anything about history, but then they're trying to tell you and get you into it, and that's what books do, and that's what making new friends is, and your job, right? Like everyone's job. So I think we're on the same page, I hope.
So would I be correct to say that, contrary to popular wisdom, the kids of today, the young adults of today, still have an attention span, and they can still read and watch long shows and watch long movies, and their brains haven't been completely fried by social media and smartphones? I wouldn't blame me if they had, because you didn't choose to grow up in
that's
this.
another discussion that would give us another 2 hours, and that would go into education systems and such. I still think there are an audience for it. I think yes, there was damage between. I mean, this used to be a tool, but now it's an extension of my arm.
Yes.
So I think we need to be. I mean, of course, we need to be careful, but like studios just need to give people a reason to go to the movies. So, but I do. I think. Well, I mean, while we can be pessimistic as we want about it, yeah, I agree with Samantha on this one. I think people still want to go to the movies.
It is
Yeah,
important.
I agree. And so, some of my friends are lazy and they don't want to like go to the movies. They want to like put something on their TV. But there's also just like an experience with going to the movies. I do think that it's becoming very expensive to see a movie, like, which is very frustrating, like as like a filmmaker, just because I'm like, okay, it's not as accessible for everyone to go to the movies, because like it costs like $20 to go see the film, and then people want to get food, and they like you want to make like a whole experience out of it.
Generically speaking, where do you live?
I live in LA.
Oh God, yeah.
So probably even more expensive here. But with TV, what they've done that's so genius is releasing it on a weekly basis, new episodes, is so smart. Because all of a sudden, all my friends have something to talk. Like we're all watching House of Dragon, like we all watched the finale of it, right? Or The Boys, right? And it's something that we really look forward to. And they might not be film friends, right? They don't know. They'll be like a bio major, my engineering friend, but we'll all have something in common to speak about, which was like something, in the 50s that brought everyone together. Like I Love Lucy was the big deal. Like I read something that, electricity would essentially like 20% of electricity would be like turned off when I Love Lucy was on because everyone would be watching it, right? And so I feel like they're kind of bringing that back, that kind of same passion to go see a TV show or a movie. So I really hope that momentum, continues.
It's funny, and I don't mean to say haha kids today, but up until 11 years ago when Netflix started dropping their shows all at the same time, TV shows were released weekly, and that was just how it was done. So this whole drop them all at once is really only a relatively modern innovation, if you want to call it that. And yes, to your anecdote, I'll throw out another one. I'm not that old, but I know the night that the finale of MASH aired, which was a 11-year-long show about the Korean War, there was basically a water shortage in America because everybody was going to the bathroom at the same time during the commercial breaks. That's how much of a monoculture, for better or worse, some of this stuff had. And yeah.
Scott, what do you like? Because I know I've like we know a little bit about you, but like what do you love about film? Like even if that's changed or how that's changed, like I think for all of us on the call, like kids first and our passions, everything, like I think we can all relate, but like what do you love about it? And if you had to like tell somebody on the street like why you should go watch a movie or why you should like listen to, reviews about it, like what would you say?
I think at its best, film, and we're talking a 90 to 150-minute singular narrative that tells a complete story that ideally has the depth and nuance and complexity in terms of plot and character of a great novel. And when it's doing its job, ideally in a theater, but not always in a theater. I mean, I've seen some of my favorite films of all time on TV. But in a dark theater where you are relatively able to drown out your distractions and drown out the real world, and it's just you and the narrative on a screen, and I do like to sit a little bit just close enough that it almost feels too close, but I can still see the whole screen, and everybody has their own favorite seat, whatever. And I still think it has an impact, an emotional and psychological impact that still supersedes all but maybe the best television, all but the best, I don't want to trash other forms of media. There's great music, there's great books, there's great stage shows, etc., etc., etc. I mean, and in some cases, obviously seeing Hamilton on stage is an entirely different experience than watching the staged film version on Disney Plus. Although, they're both valid. But I still think in terms of mass filmed entertainment, movies are still, for me, the best in terms of telling a complete, valuable story. And whether it's one that just works as a straight genre exercise, whether it's one with moral educational value, I think Roger Ebert used to call movies empathy at 24 frames a second or something. Actually, no, he called it the empathy machine. Studio Movie Grill calls them, in their pre-show thing, they're a dinner theater that around, they call it empathy at 24 frames a second. And I still think even amid the last decade or two of incredible and incredible competition for the time and dollar for people's entertainment consumption, I think it's worth noting that all of these forms of entertainment are trying to be as good as a good movie, if that makes sense. I hope it does, because I made that up as I was going along.
But kind of going back to like kids and like young people that are also kind of going in this industry, it's like, yes, movies may not be what a lot of people want to go see, and yes, it's always changing, and there's always gonna be a market for movies, but I still think kids are, while they might be watching stuff on their iPads, they're still getting good content. Like children's education and children's TV shows, I think are better. Steven Universe, Bluey, for instance. Like, we are getting great TV shows. We're getting good stories still, and how we're getting it and how we're consuming it. That's a whole nother argument of whether or not that's good or bad. I mean, like back then, people thought the only good form of entertainment was going to the theater, and then films became a thing, and then television became a thing, and so all generations are going to have opinions on whether or not this form of entertainment is going to be detrimental, and they have all their pros and cons. But as long as, again, we're providing good stories, I don't think there's an issue with that, especially since people are still wanting to take risks and make challenges, and that's because we've been using the word content a lot, and it grinds my gears because I hate that word, because I think it just lumps into some of just a whole hodgepodge of things, but I feel like it's, at the end of the day, it's stories, because I think content has negative connotations, because it makes
I
you,
agree.
content is just basically, you just want to make, it's just making things, but without any sort of thought behind it. That's just my opinion on it. I don't think content is a good word to use in terms of film or theater or books or music. We're not here to make content. We're here to tell stories.
That is a very popular opinion within the entertainment community, and you're not wrong. I do my best not to use that word unless I absolutely have to, for just that reason. It's become this catch-all for a way to devaluing individual pieces of art as just sludge to be consumed and checked off a box. Okay, you have been more than generous with your time, and I appreciate that. Just to wrap this up, what's the best movie you've seen either this year, this summer, ideally this summer, but if there's something that you saw earlier that just knocked you out, and then I will share mine, unless one of you names it first. Carly.
Well, I actually recently went to the movie theater to go see Twisters, and I know that was a remake, but I actually never saw the original. So I went in kind of blind.
Look at you.
But it was amazing. The acting was amazing, the storytelling was amazing. It kind of opened my eyes too to how like terrible the Twisters are over there. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does.
it was a really like good movie. The acting was incredible. I think the whole cast was incredible too, how they worked well together. I saw them in like interviews and how they interact with each other. So I think that also kind of added to the magic of the movie. I know it was also a really big movie this summer. I think a lot of people loved it. So I was one of those people.
Yeah, and in a skewed way. I mean, the original is very good. I enjoyed it when I was a kid as well. But if you haven't seen the original, you're probably going to enjoy this one even more, because you're not going to notice all the callbacks and Easter eggs and the extent that, oh, they're doing that again. If you've never seen a Predator movie, you can watch Prey and not roll your eyes when a character says, "If it bleeds, we can kill it." That's not going to take you out of the movie. So yeah, that's and I think that's part of the difference, is that a lot of these, sequels, remakes, whatever, back in the day, they were almost hoping that you didn't know it was a remake, so it would be a new to you. The Maltese Falcon, the Bogart one, was like, I think, the third adaptation of that book. But today, of course, there's more of a, people are, they're making Freaky Friday Legacy sequel specifically because they want people my age to have nostalgic, member berries, I think they're called. And yet the Freaky Friday from 2003, which was a remake, it was not remotely banking on any kids of that era having any knowledge of the 1977 original. And I think that's just, a difference in the entertainment industry. But yeah, Twisters did stand out as a tentpole IP, blah, 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 but one that was rooted in character and fun actors playing normal characters in extraordinary circumstances, which I think over the last 10 years is something that the tentpole industry has kind of lost, because it's mostly been superheroes, chosen ones, and one-man killing machines. John Wick, Ethan Hunt, James Bond, et cetera, et cetera. I love John Wick, but, variety. Okay, who wants to go next?
I think, okay, Ryan, don't come after me for this one. But I watched Inside Out 2, and I know.
Well, that movie was good. I like that one.
People, but oh my gosh, they killed it. Like they killed it. It was great. And like I love a good Pixar film. And it just did so well. All my friends loved it. Like we would spend so much time talking about how relatably funny that film was. I think Disney's been killing it this summer. I watched, Deadpool was fun. I will always watch a Deadpool movie. Will always go and see. I like, Ryan is he's the best. He's so funny. He's so great at that character. But yeah, Inside Out, that really did it for me this summer.
I mean, it made $1.6 billion, so obviously a lot of people really liked it. And it's my issues with it are very nitpicky and specific to me, in which I felt so empathetically anxious for her that I swear I spent like 40% of the movie like this. Oh, don't say that. Oh, oh God, oh no. And
But
I
I
know
think that's a good thing to feel there. Really, it like had an effect on you in some way.
Quick Deadpool question, and then I'll move on. Because my theory going into the summer that if Deadpool broke out even bigger than the last two, it'd be partially because there'd be a generation of kids that were too young to see the first two in theaters, but over the last several years, they saw them on DVD, streaming, whatever, and they caught up with some of the more kid-friendly Ryan Reynolds pictures like Adam Project, Detective Pikachu, Red Notice, If very recently, and then they would be old enough to see this R-rated, but I took my 13-year-old and I didn't feel like bad about it at all, Deadpool movie. And I think it was very much intended as an R-rated movie that you can take your older kids to without traumatizing them. And I guess my question to you and to anyone who applies, would that apply where you're somebody that discovered the franchise post-theatrical because maybe you were a little young for an R-rated movie, but over the last 7 years, you became a fan of the franchise and then showed up on opening weekend of the third one?
See, for me, I saw Deadpool when it first came out in 2016. So
yes.
I was that 13-year-old who went, to see the movie with my family and they didn't feel bad about taking me. So I feel like with Ryan Reynolds, who's really campaigning for Deadpool, back then, and just seeing how he's convinced people that, hey, Deadpool's actually a good comic book hero, we should all watch him. So I feel like throughout this past decade, it's just been a group of kids my age just watching them as they come out, not even post theatrical.
Fair enough. Who would like to name their favorite movie of the year, summer, or whatever?
Furiosa, Mad Max Saga is one of the best films in the entire year, and the fact that it's not made its money pains me. It is such a gorgeous, fantastic film, and George Miller is a genius. And the fact that it is a sequel, it's a prequel, and yet it's so in its own world, and you can taste the rust. It's great. It's a perfect, beautiful blend of storytelling, characters, and action. That's why we go to the movies. I saw it at the BFI IMAX as well. It's something you just go see in theaters, and it's just sad that it just didn't make any money, and the possibility of seeing any more stories in that world is disappointing. But hey, at the end of the day, people still love it. People are still gonna watch it and talk about it. But yeah, I think that's the best film of the year. And then if you want to give me an indie one, because I know we're talking about a lot of sequels and remakes and everything, TV Glow. I saw the TV Glow was fantastic. Yeah. And if you want a great horror film, it is a trippy indie film that it's gorgeous, beautiful.
Over the last several years, I've become a very, very big fan of Justice Smith, and I'll be very happy when he wins his Oscar eventually. Yeah, I enjoyed Furiosa. I was not surprised it didn't do that well, just because on paper it seemed like another Solo, where you have a prequel origin story of a supporting character played by a newer, less famous actor. That if you're not interested on that from the get-go, what else we got? Again, I liked Lightyear, I liked Solo, I liked Furiosa, but commercially speaking, if you weren't already on board, it was a tougher sell. But I think the fact that we got it at all is something of a miracle.
I wholeheartedly disagree.
Mad Max
Fury Road,
because that shouldn't have been as big of a hit as it was, and that was a miracle 9 years ago.
So yeah, it was a very successful. It made its money. It got a lot of awards. So yeah. I highly disagree. I think it had everything of the makings to be a very successful film. But the fact that it came out because it came out the same weekend as Garfield, It's just a situation where it's the people wanted to go see that movie more because it was a larger audience for that. That's the unfortunate part. But yeah, it still baffles me that the film is not even breaking even. But hopefully it will come out. It will come back in theaters in black and white like the last one did, and hopefully it can make its money during that time with another re-release.
I've been, a box office pundit for at least 16 years, despite along with however, many years I was doing it for fun. And to quote Unforgiven, deserves got nothing to do with it. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. See, I know in this discussion I talked about like sequels and like all that, but I like Inside Out too. That was a good movie for the summer. I want to tag on to what Talia was saying, but like, the introduction of anxiety and like the funny cameo of like nostalgia. I feel like with those type of sequels, there's like areas to grow because, maybe Inside Out 3, we see Riley as an adult going to college or showing that growth. I liked Inside Out 2 for the summer just because it was interesting to see how Riley is going through all these new changes that comes with going to a new high school and like saying goodbye to like your middle school friends. And I feel like I could resonate with that being thinking about my preteen years.
Fair enough. And last but not least,
Yes. That's a really good question. I think for me, I don't know if it was the movie, like, I don't know if these were the best like movies in terms of like, everybody on this call who's like in film and everything, like written wise, like I'm not talking about that. I am going to go at it as a probably popular, maybe unpopular opinion. I thought because of the way it brought people together and the marketing strategies behind Barbie and Oppenheimer, I don't know necessarily that like even after I watched both, I think I don't know if it's the same day, same weekend. It definitely brought up a lot of questions about what the Barbie movie, how could have been better? What are the things that were awesome about it? But then also talking about stereotypes and Oppenheimer as well. Those both coming out around the same time, and then people going and getting excited about it and going to see it. Like that's what all films need and deserve. I guess it's a little unfair because they're so popular that everybody went to see those, and the less popular films or films that maybe don't get as much attention also deserve that. I think it just reminded me like everybody was so excited, even if they didn't like it, to just go see it. And that's what we need. And I love that. Like I knew people who hadn't gone to the theater in months, but they're like, oh, my teacher told me about it or my mom saw it. And it's like, that's why I went. And it's just to get that excitement back and raise questions about mental health and raise questions about like finding yourself. And then as well as like finding out, how we can be together and everything. It was just so fun. And the capabilities we have too, like I know for Barbie, on the internet, like whenever you'd search something, the hyperlinks would be pink and like different restaurants would come out with drinks, and Oppenheimer too, like McDonald's and fast food chains. It's like, we don't want certain movies to take over, but we want that excitement for all of them.
and I think frankly, we, especially now, theatrical needs all consuming tentpoles on that scale that almost subsidize the rest of the year. And fortunately, both before and after COVID, we were getting them, whether it was Black Panther in 2018, Avengers Endgame in 2019, and then, Godzilla Kong and Spider-Man No Way Home in 2021, and then Avatar 2 and Top Gun 2 in 2022, and so forth and so forth. It's like, on the one hand, it's a scary place for theatrical to basically be counting on these, lightning in a bottle miracles, but we're at a point now that we seem to have one or two of them every year. So, I mean, if that's what keeps everything else playing at a theatrical level, and I think both movies, I mean, neither movie made my top 10 list, but I liked them both. I mean, one of my big things as a critic, if I may, is that, there is no shame in a 3-star movie out of 4. Do I think Barbie was perfect? No, but I thought it was good. And I think even if it's, feminism 101, fine. There's plenty of people that need to hear that either because they need to learn or they need to know they're not being gaslit. And, I think, I don't expect $140 million Warner Brothers movie about Barbie to go that far in terms of, being a perfect movie in every particular way. But I think it was a really strong 3-star movie that obviously resonated to a lot of people well outside the stereotypical audience for a Barbie picture. And even something like, from this ends with us. It's okay. I have my nitpicky issues with it, but that's a film that opened with $50 million based on a book. It's not just a film aimed at women, but I think it's something that's been missing for the last 3 or 4 years, which is something aimed at women that isn't just an action movie, a superhero flick, or a gender swapped IP revamp. And I think in the 2010s, Hollywood threw out a bunch of those, and a lot of them did very well, and that was great. But they sort of used that as an alibi to stop making rom-coms, melodramas, and thrillers that would stereotypically be targeted for, about, and at women. And I think a picture like this, the number that blew my mind is it made $50 million, and basically half of that came from what irregular moviegoers, which means you had people that would not have gone to the movies at all if not for that film in the marketplace. Which means if you put out more of those, you might turn some of those irregulars into regulars again. And I think that is a rare occasion, and current development notwithstanding, that's an example of learning the right lesson from Barbie. It's not just, we need to make movies on every toy you've ever heard of. But anyway, you didn't come here to hear me lecture. My favorite movie of the year, and I know this is going to sound very obnoxious, it's probably something none of you have heard of, but I kind of saw it by accident and was just astonished how much I enjoyed it. It's a $150,000 black and white comedy about a middle America gold miner in like the 1800s called Hundreds of Beavers. Okay, yeah. He knows where it's at. I don't want to say too much about this because I went in kind of blind, and it's almost a silent movie, but not quite. But it is one of the, it is the funniest, most creative, most just when you think it's worn out its welcome, no wait, there's more. And it is a miracle. Not just because it's a cheap movie that I think should win the Oscar for Best Special Effects just on principle. It is just an absolutely delightful, entertaining, rollicking, whacked out gonzo bananas comedy that, see it, don't see it, it's on VOD, whatever. But it was one of those films that, every decade or so, I'll see like a Fellowship of the Ring or a Gravity is like, I didn't think I could still feel like this, now that I'm a cranky old man. And that was the one movie that made me feel that again. And I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it at home on my 50-inch television in my guest room. So yeah, I would have loved to have discovered it in theaters first, but whatever. So anyway, that is my official recommendation. Take it or not, I will not check up on you. And unless Ranny has something she wants to bring up or something she thinks I forgot, I think I'm going to set all of you fine people free, because this has been a lovely, wonderful, I barely have to say anything conversation.
I'm going to say my favorite movie of the year.
Oh yeah, go for it.
There I am. Dune 2.
Fair enough. I liked it a lot more than the second one. I thought it was just audio visual spectacular. I assume everybody here has seen it, right?
I'm sorry.
I love
Randy loves the sci-fi. She loves the sci-fi.
I love the fact that Timothée Chalamet, between this and Wonka, has basically been typecast as a seemingly decent guy trying to work his way up in a corrupt industry that finds success doing what he wants to do, but eventually lets power corrupt him and becomes a tyrannical lunatic.
It's a double feature necessity.
Yes.
That would be great.
If they ever reboot the Star Wars prequels, and I don't want them to, but if they ever do, there's your Anakin.
Right. And Dune and Star Wars are so intertwined.
Yeah. Oh God, yes. And that was pretty impressive, the extent that is a source material that inspired almost every other big fantasy franchise you can think of: Star Wars, Avatar, Harry Potter.
Yeah.
What are the Rings was before or after Dune? I honestly don't know. Forgive me. But and
I had a great time interviewing the art director from Dune.
Oh, wow. They might be practicing their Oscar speech. So yeah,
I just want to say, thank everybody for coming today. And I think this is really a lovely conversation. And it's so exciting to see you all growing up and growing into incredible adults. Don't become too adultish, you know.
too late. Yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for participating, and thank you so much for making me look smart by virtue of your smart answers. Because as a general rule, if I don't have to say much, that's how I know it's going well. And yeah, I mean, whether we bump into each other again, good luck with all of your ventures. I am a little bit more optimistic than I was 90 minutes ago about life, the universe, and everything. And if you have any questions, concerns, or requests, you should have my email somewhere in that ungodly email chain full of bios and back and forths. If not, Rainey certainly has my blessing to give it to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Scott. This was great.
everyone.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome.
All right.
It's been an absolute pleasure.